Hi everyone, I'm Joey and wanted to share a quick demo of using Figma's new Dev Mode MCP server here within the tool. So I've been learning a lot about this in the last couple days, and it's been really fun to explore. A little intimidating at first, but also really cool to start to imagine what we could do, especially in the space of design systems. So within the demo, I'd love to just walk through how to set it up, how everything kind of works, and then try an example of building out a button component using this entire flow. So let's hop in. All right, here in Figma, and the very first thing to do to enable the Figma Dev Mode MCP server is to go up here in the menu, and you'll have access to this as long as you have a paid editor account in Figma that also has Dev Mode. Now, if we go to this menu here and go to Preferences, just towards the bottom here, you'll see Enable Dev Mode MCP Server. Once you choose to enable this, Figma will share a notification at the bottom of the screen that says it's enabled localhost with some port number. It's not really important to know, but if you have to debug, it'll help out a little bit. And I'll show you where that port and that address pops up. So we'll enable this here, and then within server settings, we've got some options, but also image settings here. We can choose between a placeholder image or using just a local image if we had those here in this file. So with that, we're on to the next step, which is we'll we'll first make sure that we have cursor installed here. And then we'll go into docs.cursor.com/tools. And in here, we have all of our MCP tools. These are kind of like plugins. And MCP, as I learn more about it and begin to understand it more, is essentially just like an open protocol that begins to specify or create a new standard of how context is passed from tools like Figma into LLMs. And this is really interesting because for the past, while now, we've been able to share images with LLMs, but it left a lot up for interpretation. It was, of course, it was able to see the design, but wasn't really able to see the layers or the structure or the different properties that might be included. It was kind of just really assuming a lot, which actually worked pretty well for the most part, but again, left a lot to be desired, especially with more detailed component work. So we'll go ahead and install or choose to add Figma to Cursor here. And once we've done that, I will navigate over here into Cursor. And the first thing I'll do is when I go up at the very top menu bar here on my Mac and go to the cursor option, I'll go into settings and then I'll choose cursor settings from that menu. Now here I see on the left-hand side MCP tools. And in here, I see that Figma is enabled. And if I click on the edit icon here, I can double check to see that address that Figma had showed me earlier. If I had enabled it at the time, it would say localhost, this port number, SSE. And here we're able to double check 127.0, that's just all our local hosts. So everything here looks correct. Now, if I close out of this and we see that we're good here, we're actually kind of like ready to begin. So I will go back in Figma and I'll make sure that I have this component here selected. And to show you how this button works, I'll bring a copy off to the right here just by holding the Option key and dragging off. And I've included a few states for this button component. It's really simple. And what I'm imagining for this demo here is, I've created 3 different states for this button component, but let's imagine like maybe I need a lot more sizes, many more sizes, and perhaps I also need to include like an inactive state that's not here, and I kind of just want this to like be over in code, to have someone else to chat about with it, to have something else or someone else kind of help me build this, which in this case will be Cursor. So at the top right here, we can choose to change this button here to a hovered state or to a press state. We can also turn off or on the icon here. So turning it off, turning it on. This button is built with auto layout, so we can go ahead and hug the content here. We're getting an odd number here just because I didn't put this icon here in a container. Probably should have, but it's fine for now. And also, this button is connected to variables. And so inside of our variable table here, I build out a very small little semantic collection that has background states for our background variables for our different states, default, hover, and pressed. And these here support light and dark mode, and they're over here within the primitive set as well. So these are just the core definitions. So it's pretty simple setup here in Figma, but now that I've got that, it's kind of time for the fun part. So I'll go into Cursor, and if I tap Command-Shift-I, I can bring up the chat here, chat dialog. And I actually used ChatGPT here to help me come up with a prompt for what I want to do. So this prompt and what I was specifying or kind of asking Chat to help me with was to create a button that's based on the existing button here within the Figma file. It should mirror the same states, but it should also support that new inactive state that we weren't able to get to just yet. It should also support 4 sizes. In Figma right now, I've only got just that one size here, but I would love to have a few more sizes. I didn't give it any specifications for like what those sizes should be. I just said 2 smaller and 1 larger, so 4 in total. Or yeah, 4 in total. Um, I haven't had enough coffee yet. And down below, I also said we should use Figma variables, we should use component properties, and I would love for this to be kind of like an interactive playground so I can preview and test all the combinations, right? Something that, we're not really easily able to do in Figma these days, at least not in a way that allows us to really get a feel for the button, for example. So I've got that prompt, copied on my clipboard. And if I could close this out and go over into our chat here, I'm using 3.5 Sonnet. And I have, as we saw, the MCP server hooked up. So I will just paste that right in. I'll go ahead and I'm actually going to delete this part that said, let me know if you'd like a reference to the original button frame. I don't need that because if I delete that and go back into Figma, I'll just make sure that small button here is selected. And that way it kind of sees the selection. I'll tap enter and let's see what happens. I actually have not tried this before, so I'm excited to see what comes of it. So it says it's going to help me create something based on the Figma design. It's examining the component in Figma. It's asking permission to run the MCP tool. It'll do this a few times for code and to get a visual out of it. So we'll go ahead and give it permission here. We're going to see that run. Okay, so it's confirming, and this is what I love about it. It kind of like shares as it goes, what it's seeing, what it's thinking, that sort of thing. So it says, I see the button component in Figma in its various states. It's going to also go ahead and get the variable definitions, and so it's calling that here through the MCP tool, that API there. And then great, so now it's starting to create the button component. We've got a TypeScript file here, and it's getting to work. I probably could not write this, but I think it's really cool to sit here and see like how the thing I built in Figma is now being translated over into code. And it's really interesting to just see like what it comes up with, how you might construct this, how it's popping in like those different states and sizes that we had asked about. And personally, like I've been learning a lot from this, whether it's, just examining like how it might name things or structure things and seeing the output. But it's just it's another cool way, another really interesting way to like interact with the components that we're building as a part of our design system, I think, especially if you're on the design side. I'm always a little envious of the engineers who can build this out. And so it's really cool to see. So we'll let this run. It's now created all our button CSS file, our playground file, and now it's creating styles for our button as well. And we should also have, I would imagine, probably an index HTML file so we can see this. So we'll let it run, and I'll pause for a moment and just come back when it's all finished. Okay, we're back, and this is so cool. It created everything. I did have to ask it to create an index HTML file. It didn't look like it created that. That could have just been my own fault or my own misinstructions or even just how I was setting this up. But yeah, we've started npm here. We've got it running within a server, which I'll show you in a moment, on our machine. And what I was looking at and wanted to double check was inside of button CSS here, it's created the entire button. But inside of button CSS, it's even brought in our variables right from Figma. And intelligently, it created variables that we did not have in Figma for our spacing values. Now, this one here, this was the original 16 and 24. That's what I had in Figma. And it generated a few more, 2 smaller and 1 larger. I bet we could have, if we had these in Figma and specified to use a different value or a different kind of stop there, it would have done that. But this is awesome, I think. And I'll show you the output here in a moment, but I was just looking through this to double check everything. It looks great. So if I go over into a Safari now, where I've got this running, it looks a little unstyled, but this is our button here. And we've got a preview at the top. We can choose between the different states. We can even see our new inactive state here. And you'll see we can switch between our different sizes. So I could bump these up and get a feel for exactly how those padding values or that sizing all feel. You'll see when I hover over it, we have our new hovered color here, or the hover color that we set, excuse me. And when I press on it, we also see that darker color come into play. So exactly, kind of taking from our color set up here at the top, it generated this for us. Now, the only thing I see missing is it looks like it lost our icon. And I want to go back into Cursor and say, This looks great. Thank you. Always saying thanks. I don't see an option for our icon, which was called, let's double check it. In Figma, we have a start icon. So I'll just copy this and I'll say it was called start icon over in Figma. Could we add that as an optional prop? Let's see how it does. So generating, it's helping me add this. I can see there's a contact button with an icon. Okay, yep. And it's double checking all that, or it's running through it. So yeah, so I had the contact button here. I had that icon. Looks like it just got lost in translation. Again, maybe something I could have done differently in Figma to set this up, or maybe the property wasn't exposed, but let's see. So it's adding that start icon prop here. We've got our size, our state, and let's see what it does. All right, we're back, and just a few seconds later, really wasn't much time there at all. I didn't even have time to go make coffee. It made the change. So we saw it over here. It kind of thought through, and it even went so far as to say I'll help you add it, but then it's also adding, of course, the CSS updates to handle the icon styling, and then it's of course knowing that that playground file exists, and so it's updating that to showcase the icon functionality here, and it kind of summarizes the changes. I just restarted NPM here, all good. And if I go back, check it out. We've got an icon here. Now, it's not the icon that we had in Figma, and I'm a little curious about that. Maybe there was a way I could have specified that. But of course, I can bring that in here, really easily now that I've got these files created. But I could switch between the sizes. I could click and hover over these just as we could before. And I have a prop now to show or hide that icon here. So pretty cool. And what I'm thinking about this, at least in my own work a little bit more, is in Figma, I only did the work of creating this button here, right? This didn't take too long at all. Got the variables and everything created. For me as a designer, it gives me a much better feeling for how this could actually feel or work. And if it were something that were even way more functional, like an input or a dropdown, or even this being embedded within a system that's already connected to Cursor, like, gosh, that could really open up a lot here. And so I'm pretty excited about this. Again, like I feel like I'm kind of brand new to all of this and beginning to explore it a lot more. But already seeing like what we can create in Figma and how we can kind of explore it way further within a tool like Cursor has me excited. So yeah, wanted to quickly share a demo of this and hopefully to get others excited as well. I think, one thing I'll kind of end on is what I'm noticing, at least on the Figma side, is it's become even more important to get things like the fundamentals correct, such as our naming, such as applying auto layout correctly, applying variables and naming those, as we would want to see them represented in code. I think for a long time, for a while at least, like applying things like constraints and auto layout, even when we didn't necessarily need them, felt like it was a little bit of extra work for what reason. But now seeing how Cursor and other tools are interpreting that work through the MCP server, it actually really highlights like how important again it is to have that at the start. So those fundamentals in Figma are still there, and applying them properly really does make a difference in the output. At least I've seen in the work that I've done over here. So yeah, excited to share this. Hope it's useful, and I'll try to do more. So I had a thought after I finished making that in Cursor, which was, I wonder what this entire thing would look like if I did it right inside of Figma using Figma Make. To be honest, I haven't been exploring Figma Make too much recently. Mostly just been focused on kind of creating within Figma and then maybe going to Cursor or just kind of extrapolating within Figma itself. So I put the same prompt in Figma Make. And how I did this was I took an instance of each one of these and brought it over here. Then I put those instances inside of a frame so that I could copy this and bring it over into Figma Make. Now within Figma Make, I pasted that in and I gave Figma Make the exact same prompt that I gave Cursor a few minutes ago. It reasoned for a little bit and then gave me this preview here. So it's actually really similar. And in fact, it did bring the icon over, which Cursor did not do at first. And it has like our very, kind of similar states that we had up here. The only thing I noticed is when our button is in the default state, for example, and we're interacting with it, it's not applying the hover and the pressed states. And actually, it looked like it also got a few things incorrect, which was if I go back into Figma and take a look here, I had called this a press state, which uses this color here and also this variable button background press. And if I go over here, it looks like that was calling it active instead of pressed. Not a big deal. But as I interact with the button here in the live preview, those variables are the color changes are not applied here. So it missed a little bit. Also, I think our inactive button looks a little different here compared to maybe what I would expect. Maybe a little darker. I think Cursor did a bit better of a job over there using Claude 3.5 over there. Same kind of tool, right? So, anyways, it's what I think is most useful in all of this is seeing a variant table really, really quickly and easily. And what I really want to be able to do is just copy this directly from a tool like Make or Cursor and bring it back into my working file of Figma. Um, as I go down, I can see a little bit more about actually implementing this. And as I take a look at the code, one thing I noticed as well is we have our button variables in here, and it also generated our sizing variables, which we didn't have to begin with. And that's all great. I did notice a bit of a difference in how these were named. So for example, here we have button default, button hover, button focus, button active. Whereas back in Figma design, as I was making these, I was specifically calling them button background press. And if I go into dev mode here, using the keyboard shortcut Shift D, just kind of interested to see like what is the output here. And if I go into, let's say like, let's go into CSS real quick. We can see like the background here is called button background hover. So it definitely had that name there. Looks like it just kind of omitted backgrounds here. Maybe there was something again I could have done differently. But yeah, just kind of cool to see this. And now, of course, from Figma Make, I could publish this out. And I could have it, be on an external site that I could then reference, which is all kind of cool. So two different ways maybe to get to a very similar destination. Also in Make, I could very easily just download download the code using this option here. That way I could run it locally if I needed to. So anyways, kind of a quick demo of Figma Make and using a tool like MCP Server to go from Figma into another tool like Cursor. So yeah, kind of fun to work on.